Sable, welcome to A Word to the Wise. There's so much I want to talk to you about. Have a bunch of burning questions that I think my audience is going to find super helpful in their career. But before we get into all of that, I want to find out more about who Sable is. What got you into being a career coach?
That's a great question. I think to give you the long view, and I'll try to do it as quickly as possible. I think from a young age growing up, I always had the sense that there was something more to success and the successful people that I saw around me than purely their technical abilities or the fact that they worked hard. I grew up in Los Angeles, near Beverly Hills, Santa Monica, Hollywood, really surrounded by, the wealthy and powerful. And, I'd look at my friends' parents and the kinds of things that they did. See, my father was a professional athlete, and that's kind of how we got there, sort of a one generation, rare freak thing. And, which is impressive in its own right. But looking around at my friends whose parents were corporate professionals, lawyers, in finance, I sort of was always studying the ways that they navigated through the world, how they would ask for things, and also that correlation between their income, which was really quite high. Being from a well-off family, still looking around, I could see there was this extra layer. And so I realized that hard work and technical skills only got you so far. And so I've really taken this lesson to heart my whole life. And when I had my first roadblocks in my own career, I had to think about those things again and level up myself in some of the diplomacy, in advocating for myself, in making the right relationships at work, because I reached this point where I felt that I was contributing at a very high level, but not seeing the rewards come back in terms of opportunities, ability to work on interesting projects, and not least paycheck. And so once I kind of figured that puzzle out in my own career and was able to get a series of really massive promotions that kind of leapfrogged my trajectory, I started coaching friends through this. I started coaching family through this. And so when I graduated from business school in 2020, having run my first business in the industry where I first worked, digital advertising, I started to think, as an entrepreneur, which I really am at heart, what is the next place where I'm extremely passionate about what I'm doing and I can scale the business? Running Facebook ads, it was fun for a while, but my soul at some point, didn't want to take it further. And I realized that I had been helping my friends, classmates, even folks who had their MBAs like me, help them and coaching them through getting these really massive breakthroughs at work. And so in 2020, that started the process of market research, talking to folks, eventually working with folks really closely one-on-one to get promotions. And now where I have a full-fledged program, a course on negotiations and the other soft skills necessary to get a promotion. So that's kind of the high-level view of how I got to where I am now.
Excellent. You said so much there, and the one that sticks out to me the most was just understanding that yes, you can work really hard, you can have all of the technical skills, you can be fantastic at your job, but that's not what gets you to the next level. That's not what gets you the promotions or a salary increase. So one thing you talk about is that people need to learn how to cultivate soft skills in addition to the hard skills that they have on the job. Could you please define what some of those soft skills are and how people can cultivate those skills?
Absolutely. I'll give you the top three that I experience when I first start working with folks, and tends to be what we spend a lot of time on. Now, like I mentioned, ultimately I'm helping people build their path to a promotion and to negotiate for that. But the soft skills along the way are, number one, conflict resolution. Okay. So, and I'll go into this a little bit more, but number one is conflict resolution. Number two is showing up strategically, right? So I mentioned it's not all about hard work, but it's about being able to let some things go and focus your attention on the things that matter for your goals. And I consider that to be a soft skill. And, the number 1 is negotiation and communicating. So communicating value. So to go back to number 1, conflict resolution. Now, this is interesting because I work with a lot of high performers at work who are doing a great job. They are hitting the benchmarks, and they typically are not in capital C conflicts. It's, where there's a knockout, drag out fight. But what it is there are little irritations every day. And there's some elephant in the room, usually, whether it's when they need to communicate with someone on another team who doesn't recognize their authority, right? Because they haven't gotten that senior title yet, whether it's their boss, right? Who's giving them feedback in a certain way that's not making sense. Or whether someone has done something to them that rubbed them the wrong way, because these are also sensitive people typically. I'm a sensitive person. A lot of my clients are sensitive people. And the soft skill that's missing there is just the comfort, the practice, and the willingness to call out the thing that is irritating you. So, for example, I have a lot of folks who get into back and forth Slack messages, maybe for like 3 days over something that has gone wrong or is technically not working. And they don't like the way the person is talking to them. That person doesn't like the way they're talking to them. The problem gets resolved and they keep working, but there's always some issue with this person. It's like, I know when I send this to their desk, there's going to be pushback. So one of the skills that I work on with folks is a methodology for sitting down, naming the elephant in the room, and doing this whenever it comes up, whether there is like a brawl or it's just, I've noticed that every time I send a report, we get into this 3-day long back and forth over minute details. This is what it looks like from my perspective. What does it look like from your perspective? And how can we find a new path forward that works for both of us? So just being able to have that conversation at every level, whether it's with your boss or your direct report or someone on another team, that is something that if you can do that, it eliminates so much background stress. Because like I said, these folks are working so hard and they're carrying so much, including all of the interpersonal dynamics. And so when you can learn how to have those conversations, you free up so much of your mental energy. And a benefit is that so few people have these conversations. I'm going to ask you, how often have you had someone who's not your direct boss, right, sit down on their own initiative and schedule a meeting just to figure out what's going on with you, express what's going on with them, something that might irritate them? That rarely happens. So you also, when you can do this, you automatically, not only are you decreasing your stress, but you're being seen as someone with unique skills in the office who has the ability to grow into senior management. So it's a win-win. The second skill is talking about money and what you want. When you're good at your job, odds are, and I mean, I work with a lot of folks who they're kind of taken for granted at this point in some ways. They're well compensated for the industry range, but they're not well compensated for what they bring to the team. And the problem is they've spent their whole lives in this, quote unquote, high performing set of people and skills. And most of your life, you're rewarded for hard work. And there are set benchmarks. I work hard, I do well at the tests, I get the A. That means I get into the right high school. I take the tests, I get into the right college, and then in college, you are shooting for a certain GPA or whatever to get into social clubs. Then in the workplace, it's the same. First few years, probably 3 to 5 years out, there are certain benchmarks, and you don't have to ask so much for what you want because you come in as a junior employee. Then you become, an associate or whatever. Then you become a full-fledged employee, and you really are mastering technical skills in your industry. And so there is a correlation between your compensation and your skill set because you are still performing according to benchmarks. Once you hit the manager level and you're trying to reach senior management, you're no longer going to be automatically rewarded for checking the box. Not only are there many people now at this level, right? Because you've spent several years getting to this level and other people have as well. And it's not as easy to distinguish yourself versus other people. So there are two things, and I'm remembering about this soft skill. One is figuring out where to spend your energy and how you are going to stand out. So this has to do with personal branding. People have different reactions to the idea of a personal brand. Some people think that it's inauthentic, but I would actually posit that coming up with how you want to be seen in the workplace and what skills you want to uniquely be known for is a benefit for everyone, because they know who to go to when they need quick help in a certain area. Let's say you're really good at coming up with processes, or you're very good at communicating best practices to other people, or some technical ability, right? Now that you cultivate that brand, people can come to you to solve that problem very quickly. And you can decrease your time spent, right? You want to do your job, but after a certain point, the things that fall outside of what you uniquely can bring to this organization, those things don't matter as much. So you can decrease your stress, decrease your time spent, spending that additional 30 minutes at 6 o'clock, adding punctuation to a deck, when your thing and your brand should be about, creating a whole new data pool and dashboard or whatever, or wireframing things. So that's some of the soft skills, is coming up with your brand and how you are going to express this in the workplace so that it's clear to everybody else. And what that does is it also allows you to ask for money, ask for compensation, other rewards too. Maybe you want to do more high-level strategic work. Maybe you want opportunities to shadow VPs at the company because you're thinking about a successful exit down the line, right? When you have a unique brand, you can make a connection to why you need to be paid uniquely and why you need compensation that's unique. And so coming up with being comfortable owning your strengths and letting go of some of the things, right? High performers are used to having all the boxes checked. Not all the boxes need to be checked equally. And you need to get to the table and voice what it is you want. So that is, a skill, because you haven't had to do it before. You're just rewarded. And so that kind of bleeds into the third soft skill, which is negotiations. I think that people really, and we could go on and on about the art of negotiations. That's something I teach in this whole course, but people do not give enough weight to the way that they say things. Framing. Most people are taught, and especially I'll keep it narrow in the realm of asking for promotion, to talk about what they deserve because they think it's a one-to-one. That's how our entire culture is set up. It's a one-to-one. You get an A, you get a 100% on the test, you get an A, right? You have a 4.0 GPA and you are in student government, you get to the Ivy League, whatever it is. But in a promotion, when you talk about, your brag sheet, these are all the accomplishments I've done. This is all the hard work I do. I do everything at a senior level. Therefore, I deserve a promotion. That is a conversation all about rights, your rights, what you deserve. And you're setting the conversation up from the beginning with you're implying that if the other person does not give you what you were asking for as a result, they have violated your rights. I've done this, I deserve X. Instead, people really need to focus on interests. Shared interests between you and the other person, and the interests more so of your boss and the person that you're pitching. That requires a little background information, doing the research, figuring out how your boss uniquely describes their own problems, uniquely describes the challenges ahead. And that needs to be your entire focus, right? That's what I teach people. That's how people work with me have the most success. Instead of talking about what you've done and what you deserve, what would work for you, it's all about what the other side is interested in. How can we avoid their fears? How can we reach their goals? And that's information that you need to be accustomed to going and getting. It doesn't come up in a status meeting. It doesn't come up even when your company says these are the goals. That's very different than what your boss will literally say. And so a soft skill is, reading the room and making that the number one priority is addressing your audience. So that's, we did a little bit of a high level and a deep dive on all of that, but hopefully that gives you a sense of some of the skills that you do not learn, even being a high performer your entire life. You will not have learned or studied when you get to this manager reaching into senior management place.
Those were absolutely phenomenal tips and skills for people to have at the forefront of their mind. And what you said in the art of negotiation, it shouldn't be, I've done this, so I deserve this. Because that's something that I struggle with sometimes. Because I'm always like, how do I approach this conversation? Because I don't want to come off like, you need to pay me this or else. Because automatically, whoever you're talking to, even if they are open to that conversation, immediately it's going to be a pushback, right? Like, oh, well,
Exactly.
what do you mean? People are going to get on the defense. That's just how people are. So I really like what you said about shared interest and making sure that you go out and find out what some of the shared interests are. It's not just going to come to you in a all hands meeting. So that was really, really good. My next question for you is, what is the appropriate time to seek a promotion, right? Because some people, or a salary increase, right? Because sometimes people do it coming into the company. They might be too timid to do it at the start of the company, but maybe as they continue to work within the company, they're like, you know what, I do want a raise. I do want a promotion. Are there specific time frames to go about seeking a promotion or a salary increase, especially when you're already in a role?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I will focus on being in the role very quickly. Definitely negotiate when you come into the role, but we can circle back on that. In the role, there are two things you want to think about. Number one, and this may be news to people listening, is you want to be the person to strike first. What I mean by that is, so often folks defer to their companies and what the normal timeline is, and even the time of month, right, that conversations take place. And they wait to get a little bit of information about what their boss thinks, their trajectory is like, if they're going to get a promotion. And that comes back to being uncomfortable, I think, with speaking about what you want. You actually want to be ahead of this process. So two things to think about. Number one, you want to have a fully fledged outline, right, of what you want your next position to look like. And you want to present that to your boss before they have started this process on their own. So that means if your normal review cycle, is in March, and that's when you're going to sit down, and that's when, maybe February, March, they're going to be thinking about what your package is. That means that you want to hit them in January or Feb, right? So you want to be 2 to 3 months ahead of when you think this discussion might take place, were your boss to initiate the conversation. And that really comes down to, this human cognitive bias called the anchoring effect. Humans are very bad at moving sufficiently away from whatever initial conversation, initial figures that are thrown about. This has been studied since the 70s. Research around this won a Nobel Prize. It is impossible to resist, even if you know what the other side is doing. So as long as you do that background research, which in a company is much easier to do, you can sit down with your boss and you can say, what's keeping you up at night? Before they know you're going for a promotion. You can talk to your, department leader and say, what are the biggest obstacles ahead? You can do that stuff when you're internal, right? You can sense what things actually get 80% of the status meetings, regardless of what was on the agenda. So long as you have a reasonable idea of what your next position should look like, and I mean things you're going to do for them and what you want in return, then you should be making the first offer. Always, always, always. People get this wrong. There's like this phrase, person who speaks first loses. That couldn't be further from the truth. The only time you do not want to plant in their brains first what it's going to look like is when you do not have this sufficient information. You do not understand your counterpart at all, but that is not going to be the case when you're already internal to a role. So number one is aim early. Now, in terms of whether it's appropriate, all that matters, it's not about how long you've been there. Now, are you going to have a harder lift if you try to get promoted a month in and nothing has changed? Yes, because people are conditioned to, same way that if you start a conversation around rights, even people who were on your side are going to get defensive. When you start the discussion a month in, people are just conditioned to maybe be a little defensive. However, great times to ask for a promotion or salary raise are right when you find that your employer's best alternative to keeping you on the team and happy is low. So again, their best alternative to negotiating something favorable to you is a poor alternative. That is the only thing that should determine, that determines how high you can aim and whether you can have a successful conversation. So if you are 3 months in and everyone on your team gets fired except for you, and you take on a bunch of new responsibilities and the pace is moving quickly, and you know that your team cannot afford, and it would be a huge headache to go out, find someone new to do the work that you've taken on, or, they literally can't lose you. This actually works for folks who are not even, you don't have to think that you're the best person, in the company or whatever, but it's about the alternatives of the other side. When they are weak, you strike first and you strike hard. So that is the time to move. That's the time to do it. That can be as early, and you can strike first as early as 6 months, into a position if you know that you are the best option for your employer. And I want to say, more importantly, that you can make that case. Reality is subjective. The same people can make two different arguments and have, just with different arguments, have totally different results in their promotion. So that's why I really encourage folks to think about their next promotion, whether that's a capital P promotion, the way that your company thinks about it, where it's a level change, the title, salary percent bump, whatever, or it's just a lowercase p promotion because this is what I need to take my career further. Sometimes that's just about looking good for your next role and making sure when you do job hunt, it is really at an elevated level. That starts on day one because, like I said, it's about perception. So if you can figure out, based on my boss's needs, which I didn't infer, I went and I got them like a good market researcher, right? Based on their needs and based on what I can uniquely do, or plausibly could uniquely do, where is that intersection? Starting day one, you want to make that visible to everyone else. You still do your background job, but really it's that intersection of their problems and their interests and your unique differentiators that you want to take steps to emphasize, whether it's in the projects you take on, this one versus that, whether it's the way you show up in meetings, little side projects that you do, whatever, or just making sure those materials, maybe you spend the extra 30 minutes at 6 p.m. on those things, not others. Now you can make a pitch that is demonstrably true, or at least is perceived to be true, that their best alternative to finding some agreement with you, which again, you have anchored because you went first. So you're anchoring high, right? You may make some concessions, but you want it to be the case that your boss understands that they have weak alternatives to making you happy. That can be created, that can be cultivated, and that can be communicated if you're being strategic. And that's what brings success.
That's very interesting that you say that, especially when understanding, okay, well, they obviously need me and kind of playing on that. But, I've heard so many arguments in the past where it's go job hunting, get a counter offer or some sort of offer from a new company. Or some people say even lie about it and like go to your boss and be like, hey, by the way, just got this offer. This is what they're paying me. This is the role that they want me to, jump into. Are you willing to negotiate with me to keep me in this company?
Sure.
Would you say that's an effective method? Because I think about that. On one hand, I do see that working, but on another hand, I do see that leaving a bad taste in, a bad impression on a boss or supervisor. So again, do you think that's an effective method, or it can be an effective method if you do it a specific way?
Yes. Yes and yes. No, yes, yes. Okay, let me explain. In negotiations generally, like if we're going to get really theoretical, you can really strengthen what you're going to end up with by having multiple offers, for yourself, right? Because logically, if you want, let's say you want $200,000, let's just put out numbers. Let's say you want $200,000 salary and you have an offer, you're making 150 now, you want 200, let's just keep it round. And actually, some of my clients have done this. So it really is possible. The sky's the limit. If you have offers on the table and they're offering you 180, well, now you are not, if salary is truly the driving factor, which I would argue people leave a lot on the table by only focusing on salary. But if that is truly the main driver, now you don't have to settle for anything that's less than 180, right? So it increases what you're going to walk away with. The more alternatives you personally have, I told you that the strength, how aggressive you can be is based on the strength of their own alternatives. Now, the point that you have to settle at is based on your own alternatives. So you're not going to settle for anything less than the 180 that someone else is offering. So that can be helpful. Now, in practice, it is very difficult to use the outside offer and dangle this when you want there to be ongoing goodwill, just as you said, right? In a situation where it is an ongoing relationship and you actually want to stay, which there are benefits to staying somewhere for a while, even if you delay, right, that salary bump that you could get today, you can do more groundwork sometimes at a company that if you wait 1 year, well, you're getting way more than you were going to get a year ago anyway. It is hard to do this without putting a bad taste in the other person's mouth. It is extremely difficult. And so I don't even coach. Now, what I think the reason why people want to do this is because they have cultivated the skill of interviewing and getting job offers to a much more advanced degree than they have cultivated the skill of highlighting their differentiators strategically in the office so that they can get compensated back for it. So it is just as effective internally when you want to continue to have goodwill. Technically, yes, if we were to run research and look at data, having outside offers technically can force a higher offer. But when you want to build goodwill, it is just as effective and it's less risky to the relationship to instead weaken their best alternatives, right? So instead of strengthening your alternatives, which is one approach so that you can raise your minimum standard of what you need to accept, the other is to weaken their best alternatives or the perception, of their best alternatives so that they have to meet you where you're at. And if you couple that with making an aggressive, reasonable but aggressive starting ask, and you start the conversation, that is just as effective, if not more. So usually I don't think people, at least at the level that I'm working with folks who are already mostly in the six figures, and reaching toward that multiple six figures, it's hard to get enough job offers, first of all, that are actually more attractive at the same time that you're trying to strengthen your case for promotion. It's kind of like you're spreading your energy around. So usually people don't have good enough offers to be bam. It's like a lateral move. Maybe the salary is a little better, but they don't even know if they would like that company more. Or it's because They're queasy about some of the soft skills. They haven't cultivated them enough that we talked about earlier on. So they're just coming to the table for their promotion following, the process that their company laid out, which is that the company now is anchoring in their own favor, right? You don't want to listen to anything they say. It's like, no, 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 no. I don't care that you said it takes a year. I don't care that it's usually only 5% raise. That is all out the window. All that matters is the strength of their alternatives. And so I think usually people want to use the dangling job offer because it's still easier for them, even though I said it's a laborious process, it's still easier for them to just like have this one-liner ultimatum than to go through and say, I want this salary, I want these opportunities. This is what I want my growth plan to look like. This is what I want the timeline for my next promotion to look like. These are the clients I want to work with. These are the ones I don't. That is still harder for people than just trying to get one offer and dangling in front of their employer. So long story short, I do not encourage this when you're actually trying to grow internally and build up your network internally. Much easier to weaken their perception of what else they can do.
Yes, I totally agree. I think there's so many people out there that love their company, like what they're doing, and want to actually grow internally. So using that tactic only works if you really feel like you don't really care too much for the company. Yeah. It's like, oh, whatever. Okay, so speaking of, we spent a lot of time talking about moving internally. Now I want to talk about folks who are pivoting into a new career. They've had a very good career working in a different industry, had different roles, but now they're completely pivoting. And a lot of times, when they're offered a certain amount of money, there's this fear of, should I ask for more? Because I technically don't have on paper the skills, the hard skills anyways, to actually ask for more, because this is the first time I'm in this industry. This is the first time I'm going to be in this role. So it's going to be a learning curve. What advice do you give to people who are in that position? Do you encourage them to negotiate as much as possible? Is there a middle ground? How should they work around that?
That's a great question. So there's a couple of pieces to this answer. First, always negotiate coming in. It doesn't have to be for money. This is the second part. One of the crucial steps that people miss when negotiating is getting the right issues on the table. By issues, I mean, what are the things that you can possibly negotiate for? What are the negotiable issues on your contract? People, again, tend to take their company's lead on what they were taught, right? You may think there's only certain negotiable issues. Those are your salary, maybe it's PTO, your title, maybe it's bonus. These are all contentious issues. And by contentious, I mean, the other side knows that they want to keep money too. They're already conditioned to not give you a certain title based on what everyone else in that title has, right? So you can ask for those things, yes, but why are you coming into a new industry, right? What is your, ideally, probably you're coming into a new industry for a long-term change in your quality of life, your long-term earnings, work that excites you, a better culture. So what are the things that you can ask for around those objectives, right? Yes, I want you to ask for salary because, your starting salary can really benchmark your future gains, because sometimes they just do a raw calculation of a percentage. So if you can get a little bit more now, it's a trickle-down effect where everything else is a little bit more and that compounds. Part of being able to do that is having the right issues on the table. So I mentioned so much to talk about here. You want to figure out what can you ask for that satisfies some of your other objectives. So maybe you want to actually, instead of negotiating for a salary increase, ask for that, but have a backup ask where you can shadow another department in the company, right? Like you're in a brand new industry. Maybe you want to guarantee that you can spend 4 weeks in aggregate over the next year shadowing other departments. That is something that is not contentious. It's not contentious in the same way that salary is, because it's unique to you. They don't have a built-in knee-jerk no ready to go on that, right? Maybe you want to be able to travel. Like, let's say you move to a company where they have an international presence or a new industry that has like global implications. maybe you want to be able to take a trip to headquarters in Paris, France. This is something that I negotiated for early in my career, right? And they'll at least pay for you to go there, meet the headquarters staff, right? And that can do so much for your quality of life, the people that you meet, being able to practice a language that you want to be able to speak fluently. Maybe it's going to certain conferences because you're new to this industry. You need to meet other people in this industry who are not just at your company, and you need to be known as being a member of this industry and get a wider view than you would just, onboarding in this new role. So maybe you can ask to be sent to Afrotech, maybe you can ask to go to Con, those are bigger ones, but things like this, you need to come to the table prepared, right, to ask for the things that will give you value, whether they're standard items or not. So that's number one. And number two is about positioning again. So similarly, the company that you've just gotten an offer from, and any company really, they are used to their standard talking points. Because again, most people don't go out and learn this or how to change the narrative or whatever. Instead of having the conversation they want to have, where let's say you're coming into a new industry and it's all about like, how well do you know JavaScript? Do you know SQL? Are you used to working in, cross-functional teams, whatever? That's the conversation they want to have. But let's say you're a teacher, you were a teacher for 10 years. The conversation that you want to have, right, is about building team cohesion, is about coming up with systems and processes, because you put together lesson plans for 10 years and you had to, teach things to new folks and build a sense of community in the classroom. These are the skills that you have that other people do not have. And ideally, you have highlighted these all throughout your interview, right? I recommend that a lot of people have basically an arsenal of stories that they can tell, because the human brain just loves a story. We love a beginning, middle, and end, same structure every time. It can be as basic as you want it to be, but you need to come into this new industry with your own set of stories. You need to have the conversation that makes you look good. They may have thought this is going to be about coding or whatever, and it will be, in terms of raw technical proficiency, but you also need it to be about the skills that you have cultivated previously that they find valuable for some reason. There's a reason why they picked you. So you have the conversation you want to have. And when you can do that, you can ask for more than someone else coming in sort of entry level for this industry would be able to have, because you have changed the focus. Now you look like you have unique skills that are hard for them to quantify. When it's hard for them to quantify, you can be larger in what you ask for.
All of these are so good. I feel like we need to have like a part two, part three.
I'll come back.
Yeah, yes, please. You have to. This has been amazing. This has been wonderful. I'm sure the listeners are getting so much tips and gems from our conversation so far. So thank you so much, Sable. But before I let you go, obviously this is called A Word to the Wise. So I always ask all of my guests to give one final word of wisdom to the listeners. Now, it could be about what we've been talking about, or it could be something completely different that you just kind of keep in your back pocket through life.
Totally. Great. I love it. And, it's been a pleasure. And I hope that your audience got a lot of out of this. They can definitely contact me,
Yes.
if you just want to chat. I am on LinkedIn. My name is Sable Worthy. You can just send me a message, say that you heard me here, and we'll chat. Maybe I can help you. Maybe we'll just get to know each other and build each other's networks. But my final word to the wise would be this: be proactive and take action, right? So be proactive. So much of what I teach is around folks deciding on their own what is valuable to them. What do you really want? And now I want you to go out and get it. This falls right back into my methodology of proactive negotiations and getting a promotion proactively, but it's really anything in life. I've talked about a lot of skills that folks don't have. And sometimes you know what skills you don't have, or you know that there's a problem. Even if you just know, I'm sitting at work and I feel that I'm not, receiving my due, I'm not performing to my full potential. There are things that I want. What I have learned in my own life, and it took me a while to become a proactive person, is that you are going to be the best equipped to solve this problem. Well, I don't mean you don't need help, right? I've had coaches, I spend tens of thousands of dollars every year on coaching, business coaching, life coaching, not to mention therapists and every other self-care thing. But you are the one who can make it happen. Sometimes it means getting help. Sometimes it means asking for a coach, or learning how to ask for what you want. Because these desires, these things that you want, they're not going to go away. And you can spend 20 years waiting for things to line up properly, and you might eventually get them. Or you can take a little bit of risk now, get that coach, have that conversation, set that date, where you're going to discuss something, and just take action to getting there. It's the only way you are going to reveal what is really required to get what you want. And it's going to be the fastest way to reach your end goals. No one else is a mind reader, and no one else can take as much action as you can. So yeah, that's all I would have to say. Don't be afraid to ruffle feathers. Think of all the things that you were worried about 5 years ago, probably don't matter at all today. Few of them do. Few of the things you left sleep on and the actions that you took that you were embarrassed about matter today. So go out there, be proactive, get the help that you need if you need it, and ask for the things you want. You will be much better off in 5 years than you would have just sitting back and waiting.
That is definitely some words of wisdom right there. I'm definitely going to be holding that. But yes, I will be leaving your LinkedIn in the show notes for people who are interested in connecting with you, reaching out to you, and learning more from you. Again, Sable, this was an amazing conversation. I will definitely have to have you back on the podcast, because I'm sure that was just covering the surface on these topics. But thank you for stopping by the show.
Thank you so much, Jumi, for having me. It was a pleasure. And I hope that folks get a lot of value out of this. And I look forward to part 2, part 3, whatever we need to get the message across. I'm here for it.